Captain Elias Kane of the Terran Expeditionary Corps stepped cautiously over the debris-strewn ground. His exo-armor groaned with every motion, streaked with soot and dotted with fresh scorch marks from plasma bolts. A micro-HUD in his visor painted the ruins in shifting lines and tags movement sensors pinging faintly but offering no clear readings. The battle had lasted nearly 12 hours straight, ending with the last Velari defenses crumbling just before sunset. The Velari had fought like demons, fast, precise, and unyielding. Many humans had underestimated them because of their slender frames and graceful movements. Elias had learned differently the hard way. One wrong step against a Velari warrior could mean a blade in your gut before you even registered they'd moved. And yet, as fierce as they were, they had fallen one by one until the city was silent but for the crackle of fires. A faint sound broke the stillness. Scrape, pause, scrape again. Elias froze, rifle raised, and turned toward the source. Through the drifting smoke, a figure emerged from behind a collapsed stone archway. She was tall, though her posture sagged with exhaustion. Armor that must once have gleamed like polished obsidian was cracked and blackened. Long ridges of chitin-like plating ran down her forearms, and from the crown of her head extended a spined crest that swept backward, now dulled and matted with blood. Her golden eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, fixed on him with a predator's intensity. For a moment, Elias thought she might attack. Instead, she staggered forward 3 unsteady steps, then, with deliberate motion, sank to her knees on the rubble dot. It was not collapse. It was ceremony. Her hands turned upward, palms open, forearms angled to display the wounds and burns marring her scaled skin. Among the Velari, Elias knew this was the gesture of the empty fang, a formal surrender. It was rare, and it was final. A warrior who performed it would either be claimed by their victor or killed swiftly. Human, she rasped. Her voice was rough, but not weak. You have taken my city. My clan is dust. Her gaze never wavered. If you will end me, do it now. Elias kept the rifle's barrel steady. You don't sound eager to die. Something flickered in her expression, neither fear nor shame. Pride, perhaps, mingled with something harder to place. I am Sharon, daughter of the High Fang of Velara, last of my blood. If I am to live, I will not live as nothing. I will give you what I can, my skill in war, my loyalty. She hesitated, her voice lowering to a steady murmur. And my warmth. The words hung in the cold, smoke-filled air. Elias's brows furrowed behind the visor. In human speech, it sounded almost like an innuendo, but in Velari culture, it carried a different weight. Warmth was more than comfort. It was an intimate pledge, a sharing of life itself. Velari bodies ran hotter than human physiology. 2. Offer one's warmth was both practical and symbolic, a promise of protection and survival in the cold void. It was also a bond far deeper than mere surrender, a binding tie between warrior and victor. You'd offer that to your enemy? Elias asked slowly. Her golden eyes narrowed slightly. I offer it to the one who defeated me. That is the way of my people. Kill me or keep me. The rifle felt heavier in his grip. He had taken prisoners before, but never like this. Her offer wasn't born of desperation. There was still steel in her posture, pride in her words. It was the voice of someone who accepted the reality of defeat but refused to let it strip away her identity. Elias didn't lower his rifle right away. The standoff between them wasn't about weapons anymore. It was about what came next. Her posture was still proud, her shoulders straight despite the blood drying on her ribs. She wasn't trembling, like a beaten captive, and there was no begging in her eyes. He'd been trained to recognize the difference between desperation and resolve. Sharn had the latter. What's your name? he finally asked. I already told you. Her voice carried a faint rasp, as though speaking hurt. Sharon, daughter of the High Fang. My father ruled the skies of Valora for 30 cycles. My brothers are dead. My mother died in the first strikes. I am all that remains. It was more information than most captives offered in their first breath. Elias took note. Why did you fight on the front lines? You could have stayed behind. The palace walls. Her crest twitched faintly, a subtle expression of disdain. A Fang who hides is no Fang at all. The blood of my clan demanded I stand with my people. He could respect that. He glanced down at the jagged cut along her side deep enough to have slowed a human to a crawl, but she had made it this far. You're wounded. I will heal, she said flatly. If you keep me alive. Elias let his rifle lower, just a fraction. And if I don't? Her gaze didn't falter. Then kill me now. But if you do, my offer dies with me. He exhaled slowly, his breath fogging the inside of his visor. And that offer is... What exactly? Your loyalty? Your warmth? He kept his tone neutral, but the word tasted strange in his mouth. Yes, she said simply. The bond of survival. The pact of the defeated and the victorious. I will be yours to command, yours to protect, and yours to claim. You will be mine to serve, mine to shield, mine to honor. That is warmth. That is what I offer. Elias wasn't. Sure, what unsettled him more, that she spoke those words like a vow, or that she clearly meant them. Among humans, surrender was a legal matter papers, negotiations, custody. Among Valari, it was primal, binding. Something that crossed into both survival instinct and cultural ritual. On Earth, surrender didn't mean ownership. He had to make that clear. Understand something. Where I'm from, you don't belong. To me because you lost. You're not a trophy. Her eyes narrowed, as if trying to decide whether he was insulting her or simply speaking truth. You think I offer myself from weakness. I do not. This is not slavery. It is choice. You bested me. That makes you worthy. That word worthy carried weight in her tone. In her world, worth was proven through combat, not rank or bloodline. He had earned hers by surviving her people's fury. He looked at the wreckage around them, the bodies, the still-burning spires, the shattered city. The war here was over. But there was another war coming, one of diplomacy, information, and survival. A high-ranking Valari warrior could be invaluable. Finally, Elias slung his rifle over his shoulder. All right, you come with me. You'll answer our questions. You'll help us prevent more fighting. And my offer? His mouth twitched, not quite a smile. You can keep your warmth for now. Let's see if you even survive the night. Her golden eyes met his, and there was again that faint, razor-thin smile. Then I will. They moved through the ruins together, his armor servos humming with each step. She walked at his side, still limping but refusing any help. The silence between them was not awkward. It was measured, the quiet of two warriors who had yet to decide if they were allies or enemies. When they reached the extraction point, the other human soldiers froze at the sight of her. Mutters passed. Through the snide remarks about keeping souvenirs and wasting resources on an enemy, Elias ignored them. This wasn't up for debate. As the dropship descended with a hiss of thrusters, she glanced at him once more. Tell me, Captain, she said. Does your world know the value of warmth? Some parts, he replied. The dropship's ramp groaned under their combined weight as Elias stepped aboard with Shoran just behind him. The interior smelled of scorched alloy and stale air, the metal plating scuffed by weeks of constant deployments. The human soldiers, already inside, turned to stare. Valari warriors were rare trophies, alive ones even rarer. Most were dead before they ever left the battlefield. The first thing Sharon noticed was the way they all looked at her, not as a person, but as a threat that somehow still breathed. One corporal muttered into his cums, "Guess Kane's bringing home a pet." The smirk he wore was sharp enough to cut steel. Sharon's gaze snapped to him, and though she said nothing, the predator in her eyes was enough to make him break eye contact and pretend to check his rifle. Elias caught the exchange, but said nothing. Discipline was one thing, but letting his men know she wasn't helpless was another. She chose a seat near the rear, her movements slow and deliberate, like a wounded predator conserving strength. Even sitting, she kept her back to the wall and her eyes on the room, tracking every soldier's posture and weapon placement. As the dropship lifted off, the city fell away beneath them, its burning towers reduced to orange pinpricks in a sea of ash. "You watch like we're still in battle," Elias remarked, taking the seat across from her. Sharon's golden eyes slid toward him. "I am. War does not end because you leave the ground." He couldn't argue with that. Hours later, the dropship docked with the TSS Harbinger, a Terran heavy carrier orbiting Velara. The docking bay was a cavern of steel, full of clanging machinery and the smell of heated thrusters. As they disembarked, the ship's crew paused in their work to glance at the newcomer. Whispers followed them down the bay. Elias noticed Sharon's chin lift slightly, the way her stride lengthened despite her limp. She was showing them she wasn't broken. When they reached the security wing, medics tried to take her for treatment, but she shook her head. "Later," she said. "I wish to see my cell first." Elias frowned. "Cell? You're not a prisoner in the way you think." She gave him a strange look, as though puzzled by his refusal to fit into her cultural expectations. "You defeated me. I am yours. Where else would I go but where you put me?" "That's not how this works," he said, stopping just inside the corridor. "On Earth, surrender means you're under our protection. You'll be housed, fed, treated for injuries. You're not a possession." Her crest twitched faintly in disbelief. "And yet you can order me anywhere." Protection, possession, they sound the same when spoken by the victor. Elias didn't push the point. He wasn't here to rewrite her worldview in one day. That night, Sharon's quarters were Spartan but functional: bed, table, small washroom, no visible restraints. She ran her clawed fingertips over the table's smooth surface, then looked at him. "Your rooms are cold," she observed. "Temperatures regulated for humans," he said. "Velari run hotter." She nodded once, as if confirming a calculation in her mind. "You would not last a Velari night without fire. We would not last a Terran winter without shelter. Perhaps our species are not so different." Elias leaned against the doorframe. "Maybe, but on my world, warmth isn't something you trade for survival." Her gaze met his, unblinking. "And yet it is still the most valuable thing you have when the cold comes." For a moment, the hum of the ship filled the silence between them. Elias couldn't decide if she was speaking only about temperature. Over the next 2 days, Sharon was questioned in the intelligence wing. Humans wanted troop movements, supply caches, the location of other strongholds. She gave some answers, but not all. Elias noticed she never lied. She simply refused outright when a question crossed a certain line. That refusal didn't come with hostility. She explained it in simple terms. "I have already given you more than my people would. Forgive. What remains I keep. That is my honor." Elias began to understand her more with each interaction. She wasn't playing games. She was balancing survival with identity, walking the razor's edge between betraying her people and keeping her word to him. And somewhere in the middle of that razor's edge, a strange kind of trust began to form. Late one evening, as the ship drifted through the quiet dark between worlds, Elias found her sitting by the viewport in her quarters, the glow of distant stars painting her in silver light. "Your world, she said without looking at him. Is it cold? Parts of it. He replied, Why? She sat upright in the metal chair, her golden eyes unblinking, her spine crest held high. 2 human intelligence officers questioned her in alternating rhythms, one pressing with rapid-fire demands, the other speaking calmly, coaxing her into longer answers. Elia stood at the back of the room, arms folded, silently watching Dot. It was a dance she seemed to know well. When they asked about troop positions, she gave precise numbers. When they asked about weapon stockpiles, she described locations in detail. But the moment they shifted to the whereabouts of the surviving Hai-Fang loyalists, those who might rally the remnants, her lips pressed together and stayed that way. You've already told us where the rest of your forces are, the calmer officer said. Why not finish this? We could end the war faster. Sharon's gaze sharpened. I will not betray what I have not already given. There are lines that must not be crossed. A warrior without honor is less than dust. The other officer sighed and turned away, muttering under his breath. Elias stepped forward, breaking the session. That's enough for today. Outside in the sterile corridor, he caught up with her as the escort led her back to her quarters. You're holding back, he said. She stopped mid-step and turned to face him. I am alive because I chose what to give and what to keep. Do not ask me to give what would make me nothing. You think I care about your honor? He asked. You care more than you admit, she replied evenly. Otherwise you would have killed me in the ruins. That night, Elias reviewed the data she'd provided. Much of it had already been confirmed by other sources. She hadn't lied once. That fact alone was unusual for captured enemy personnel. The next morning, the tone in the corridors shifted. The War Council had voted to accelerate the campaign. Sharon's intelligence was already leading to surgical strikes that bypassed heavy civilian casualties. That made her valuable, too valuable for some officers' comfort. In the mess hall, Elias overheard 2 soldiers speaking in low tones. She's feeding us just enough to keep herself alive, one said. Yeah. The other replied. And when we don't need her anymore, she gets spaced. That's how this ends. Elias didn't like that thought, not because it might be true, but because of how casually it was said. Later, he found her in the training deck, surrounded by a small crowd of curious Marines. She was showing them how Velari warriors use joint rotation to counter heavier opponents. Her movements were smooth, almost serpentine, and when one soldier lunged, she sidestepped and locked his arm in an instant. You're teaching them your techniques? Elias asked after the others dispersed. They are your soldiers. Their survival is now my survival. If they fight better, we both live longer, she replied matter-of-factly. He studied her expression. No deceit. No ulterior motive he could read. Just a practicality that reminded him of veteran soldiers who'd been through too many campaigns to romanticize loyalty. That evening, he found her again, this time in her quarters, seated cross-legged on the floor with her eyes closed. You meditate? He asked. In your language, perhaps? In mine, it is the stilling of the fire. A warrior who burns too hot dies quickly. He leaned against the wall. You said once you wanted to see snow. She opened her eyes. Yes, it's not as peaceful as you think. Snow can kill you faster than fire in the right conditions. Her lips curved slightly. Then it is like me. 3 days later, their fragile trust faced its first real test. A Terran recon team vanished near a contested outpost. High Command suspected Velari holdouts and demanded Sharon reveal any hidden tunnel systems in the region. When confronted, she shook her head. I know them, but they are not mine to give. If I speak, I betray more than soldiers, I betray children, elders, civilians. I will not. Elias knew the council would see that as defiance. But he also knew she was telling the truth. "You're making my job harder," he told her privately. "I am making you see who I am," she said softly. "And if you still keep me alive after that, then perhaps my warmth is not wasted on you." The hours after the battle were quiet, eerily so. What had been a screaming, crackling storm of weapons fire was now nothing more than the soft hiss of smoke curling into the cold night air. The ruined city lay silent except for the occasional groan of a collapsing wall. Captain Elias walked slowly through the wreckage, his rifle still slung across his back. Though the fight was long over, behind him padded Zara, her once proud armor stripped to nothing more than a few scorched plates. The defiance that had blazed in her eyes when they first met was gone, replaced by something heavier and exhausted vulnerability. Yet every so often she would glance up at him with an unreadable expression, as if weighing words she wasn't ready to speak. They found shelter in a partially collapsed tower, its upper floors blown away by plasma artillery. Inside, the flickering light of a makeshift fire cast jagged shadows across the walls. Elias sat against a pillar, checking the damage to his shoulder courtesy of a glancing blade earlier that day. He didn't complain. Humans were used to pain. But Zara, noticing the blood, silently moved closer. Without asking, she tore a strip from what was left of her battle sash and began wrapping the wound with surprisingly gentle hands. "You could have left me to die," she murmured, her voice low and without its usual steel. "You could have killed me when you had the chance," Elias replied, meeting her gaze. "But here we are." She tightened the bandage and sat back, her tail curling loosely around her legs. "I wasn't lying, human," she said after a moment. "I meant my plea. I've seen the inside of your prisons. I know the fate of captured warriors. I would rather stay close to the one who bested me." Elias studied her carefully. This wasn't just about survival. There was a strange sincerity in her tone, as if the battlefield had broken more than her body. "You think I'll keep you as some trophy?" he asked. "No," she said softly, eyes narrowing slightly. "I think you'll keep me because, deep down, you understand that enemies don't have to stay enemies. And because I will make sure you never regret sparing me." The fire crackled between them. Outside, the wind howled through the shattered streets. Elias leaned back, weighing her words. She had been a commander, a warrior who'd probably sent hundreds of humans to their graves. And yet here she sat, speaking like someone ready to bind her fate to his. Was it a trap? Possibly. But he'd looked into her eyes when she'd made that desperate plea. There had been no guile there, only raw, unvarnished fear and something else. "You'll have to prove it," he finally said. Zara tilted her head. "Then give me the chance." The next days blurred into a strange rhythm. Zara followed him through the occupied streets, helping him gather supplies, scouting for potential threats. More than once, she saved him, once from a collapsing wall, once from a sniper's plasma shot that would have ended him. She fought with the same ferocity as before, but now at his side instead of against him. When word finally came that reinforcements were arriving to secure the sector, Elias knew the moment of decision had come. His commanding officer would expect him to turn over any captured enemy combatants. That was procedure. That was protocol. As they waited at the extraction point, Zara stood beside him, silent but tense. Her claws flexed at her sides, and her ears flicked nervously at the distant thrum of approaching dropships. She didn't beg this time, she simply looked at him as if already preparing herself for whatever came next. The dropships descended in a swirl of dust and wind. Human soldiers poured out, scanning the ruins. The officer in charge strode up to Elias, eyes flicking immediately to the towering alien warrior at his side. "Is this your prisoner?" Elias looked at Zara. She held his gaze without flinching. "No." Elias said finally, "This is my ally, She fought with me. She stays with me." The officer frowned, clearly unconvinced, but Elias' reputation carried weight. There were no further questions, only a curt nod before the squad moved to secure the area. Later, as they boarded the dropship, Zara sat across from him, watching the city vanish beneath them. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the roar of the engines. "You could have handed me over." Elias allowed himself a small smile. "You already proved yourself." She didn't smile back, but her eyes softened. For the first time since they met, Elias realized she wasn't thinking of herself as a prisoner or even as an alien warrior anymore. She was thinking of herself as his dot, and somewhere deep inside, Elias knew the war had given him something he never expected, a bond forged in battle, unshakable and strange. Whatever the future held, they would face it together.